Hey everybody, this is Brent Ingersoll, and you are listening to the Speaking of podcast. Today we talk politics, we talk being a Christian and being a citizen, and the big hot mess that is that conversation. I sit down with three friends, people that are just voices in my life that I like to process things with, because this is an ongoing conversation to process. I sit down with Anthony Moore and Dan Lamos and Mike MacNeil, and it was a great time to talk about this complicated and nuanced subject. Here is my conversation with these guys. Hope you enjoy. Hey, I'm here with three friends, the least woke group that's ever assembled around the table. We have four men that really can't talk on anything right now, but
here we are.
Hey, here we are.
Zero
white men.
Experience.
Four white men. Anthony, you're quarter First Nations though.
I am officially. So no, I am a little woke. I'm a quarter woke, I would say.
With what, like First Nations?
First Nations, yeah. Cree. Yeah. That is my.
I think my grandmother is quarter.
Yeah.
I have a grandmother that's quarter First Nations.
What does that make you? Like
1/16th?
16.
Still more than that woman that was running for the Democratic Party. Was her
Elizabeth
Warren?
Still more than her.
Well, since we've already offended people, I want to have a conversation today with you guys, and this is as much for me as it is for anybody who might be listening. But I want to talk about being a Christian, and I want to process this: being a Christian, politics, conservative, liberal, Trump, Biden, nations and empires, and quite honestly, the need for us to be able to have a nuanced conversation about the whole big ball of wax that is, politics right now, and being Canadian, being American. We've got Canadians and Americans in the room, and how to navigate that as a follower, as a disciple of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think it's obviously a very polarizing conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself as a Christian even, and then I find a lot of my people that are part of King's Church, that my brothers and sisters, I find them being pulled, one way or the other.
Yep.
And it's just very divisive. And it's something, though, as I think of and consider Jesus, he never really let himself be, labeled on kind of one side of an issue or another. Like he always seemed to find this kind of third way, this middle ground. He bridged things that we felt were irreconcilable, like full of grace and truth. He fulfilled the law. Like he just did a bunch of things that, for us, we have a really hard time kind of having nuance through. And so,
you're being so nice. You're saying that so nicely, Brent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I imagine
this is just the intro.
Yeah, well, it really is. But I imagine, though, like as we jump into this, like frankly, some of these conversations get really complicated.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's no simple solutions or
Absolutely.
easy answers. And part of my heart for this conversation is, as we are right now in the vortex of the American election ramping up, which isn't it just always ramped up? Like
it is.
I feel like
it has been.
I feel like it will be. In January, the cycle will start again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
there's always next time.
Yeah. That's in full. I mean, that's Category 5 hurricane right now that we're living through. And then there's rumors and talks of a snap election in Canada, possibly. And then recently I've had a fair bit of communications from other pastors in the region, inviting me to participate in specifically political, agendaed gatherings and stuff, and specifically with a conservative Canadian agenda. And I have a hard time with that. I'll just full disclosure. And I want to just process some of this conversation with friends and voices that, again, maybe lack a cultural diversity, but I appreciate, I think, the collective wisdom that's at this table. And I think if anybody else finds it helpful.
Yeah. Can we just establish, like, I think this is one thing I'd like to establish, like, before we get into all of this stuff, is just like, I feel like collectively as a society, we just need to take a deep breath. Like, just
No.
But I feel like honestly, like it's so polarizing. It's so like everything is level 10,
Yes.
right? In terms of like what's important for the future, what's important for now, what like everything is so on level 10 or 11 if the amp could go up to a level 11.
This one
right?
is clearly able to go to 11.
But I'm just like we got to be able to like really to get anywhere, we got to stop yelling at each other. We actually have to be able to sit down and have a reasonable conversation, like a reasonable, rational conversation. Like I feel like, and that is, that's a lost art in some ways, because especially with opposing political, any kind of ideological views, it just gets so, it's so like everybody's so yelly. If that's a word, right? Like
We'll make it. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, like they sort of like pander to whoever agrees with them, and that inspires them to just stay over on their own side and just lob grenades at the other side.
Well, and with the exception of like Jesus cleansing the temple, which was predominantly a prophetic act. Let's just, I mean, I do think he was legitimately ripping mad.
Right.
But
He didn't burn the temple down, though.
that's absolutely. And generally speaking, you didn't get a sense of panic out of Jesus.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like overarching fear. And he was divisive in that what people did with him, but he wasn't divided.
And it was premeditated, and there was no violence towards people.
Yes.
It was a symbolic act,
For sure. And it's like, I think you make a good point, and that comes back to the heart of why I wanted to have this conversation. Is I think right now, like one of the things, many things that God is doing in the church, even through the, this season that we're in with the pandemic and politics and just so many major like powers that are pushing against people. I think he's bringing maturity to the church and making us have to deal with some things and get beyond kind of superficial, trite, easy believism and actually start counting the cost of following Jesus and building some reason, as to why we choose to follow Jesus and figuring out how to think like Jesus.
Bad times for the world are always good times for the gospel if we figure out how to respond correctly.
Right. And I think part of that is just like, let's not avoid these conversations and dive into them.
Yeah.
So let's just take an easy one and let's just jump in. Here's what I want to do. So, cause I think there's this big overarching conversation about how do we navigate the world as citizens of heaven and followers of Jesus who have to also be Canadians, be Americans. We need to give to Caesar what Caesar's. We care about these countries we live in. We care about, kingdom agendas and kingdom values being expressed in our countries. So I want to just kind of jump into this big ball of wax. It's an overarching kind of existential conversation, honestly.
Right.
With a question, not a question. I'm going to actually ask you to do something, and you weren't. None of you were prepared for this.
Excellent.
I want you to strongman an argument. So I want one of you to give a case for why a Christian should vote for Donald Trump. One of you to give a case for why a Christian should vote for Joe Biden. And I want to give one of you a case for why a Christian should spoil a ballot or maybe not vote. And let's just go right to American politics, because I think that just kicks the wasp's nest. Yeah. So let's just. So
I'll make a case for Trump.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay.
Good. Let's go for it.
I think a lot of the reaction that people have to Donald Trump have more to do with his style and his personality than his actual platform and his politics. And so Trump is kind of like a hammer, which is okay if everything's a nail.
Right.
But it's always combat for him.
Yeah.
And things are more nuanced. You don't always have to be combative.
Right.
But when I actually look at his policies and some of his platforms, I see them defending some of the kingdom values that we would have as the church, And so I have to kind of set aside his tweeting and some of the what I find with him is like he makes these outrageous statements, but then he consults with advisors, and when they actually make the decision, he's stepped back and it's a lot more rational than his initial statement or his tweets or anything like that. So
I think objectively it is fair to say, like, if you can separate the celebrity and the divisive character that is Donald Trump and just isolate what is being done under his administration, there actually are a lot of positives, not just for an American, but specifically for a Christian. Yep. He does allow for a lot of Christian values to be expressed.
And like, I've spent a lot of time in New York City, and I think like a lot of people, like, Trump is just a New Yorker. Like, he's a guy from the Bronx, and the way he communicates is in that
no, he doesn't.
Really abrupt, kind of in-your-face style. And so people react to it. But I'm just kind of like, hey, that's what people from New York do.
Yep.
Yeah, I would love to see Kanye West in the next debate. Like, put Biden, Kanye West, and Donald Trump would just be. That would be a spectacle too much to even. Is this even real life? I felt like that last time. Like, watching the last one, it's like, this can't be real. Is this real? Yeah. So, okay. So I think you make a good point, and we'll come back around on all of this.
Okay, good.
Because there's a lot to consider in all of it. So
what are the other two options?
So the other option is,
can I take the Biden one, because I have 0 for like why I would spoil the ballot?
Okay, yeah, I wrote down spoil the ballot.
Okay, and I can speak to spoil the ballot too if you. Great. So I'll, but okay. So why are you voting for Joe Biden?
Why am I voting for sleepy Joe Biden?
Sleepy Joe Biden.
Sleepy Joe Biden. I think the argument for Joe would be from a compassion standpoint. Like, I do feel like there is something from that standpoint. Although this is super hard for me because I'm not aware of any of his sort of policy statements, or maybe even if he has any, other than he's just against Trump. But I think he's a voice for the ones who would actually feel like they are ostracized in society. Like, he's a very much in that vein of like, I would say that in his own way, he's very much wants to. I'm struggling here, but I think from a society, from a racial perspective, he does have things that he does have things that he really believes in. There are things from the left that, that he's passionate about. I'm not saying anything, but I do believe that he really cares and loves the country, and so I think he wants to see some racial justice. I think they want the rights and freedoms for women, and he wants to see women empowered, and the sort of like the almost the way you would say is like the people that would feel a little more of an outcast, that they would find their place as valued and protected in society. And so that would be a reason why I would vote for Joe Biden.
So you're not going to be his campaign manager.
Not going to be.
That was not compelling.
I would think. Well, I think if you really hate Trump, like, again, I think that's part of the platform.
It's a protest vote.
If you really hate everything that Trump is about, then
I get that.
Then this is the reason to vote.
Well, I think in the last Canadian election, I did that. Like, I voted against Justin Trudeau.
Right.
Like, that's what I did, and I actually, in hindsight, don't even know if that was the right move.
Right.
I don't regret going against Justin Trudeau, but again, it's just complicated stuff. It's complicated stuff. So
I think it's important to, like, I always remind myself, I'm not voting for these guys as my pastor.
Yeah.
Like, they're politicians. So I just have to say who is lining up as close to kingdom values, like which one is closer to kingdom values. And I know in some cases it's not going to be very close at all, but that's just what I have to deal with. So I have to kind of look at it that way.
I honestly feel like, I know this is, but I think from a perspective, I think if I was conservative, it matters more to me what the facts are. And if I was liberal, it matters more to me how that makes me feel.
Yes, and I think it's fair though to say that both of those things really matter.
I'm not. Yes, I agree.
What's that adage? It's like if you're not a liberal when you're young, you have no heart, and if you're not a conservative when you're old, you have no brain.
Right.
It's basically the.
Yeah.
And I think there's actually a lot of truth in that.
There is a lot of truth.
Yeah.
In
Like
that.
I think the logic actually lands
As
with
someone who has been both old and young, there is a lot of truth to that.
As someone who's been, I've voted on both.
Right.
I've voted liberal in the
Right.
past, and I've voted conservative more recently.
Yeah.
And
Well, I was raised like 100% totally left wing. Like
Right.
when I was growing up, I'd be way over on the left. So.
yeah, it's. I think you make a good point. And I think this ultimately does come down to like, this is why this is so like divisive and explosive, is because at the end of the day, it really does come down to what do you think matters most in the world, and what's the best way to see that happen.
And I think everybody has deal breakers, and the right and the left have very different deal breakers.
I agree.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And I think, and I mean, back to a case for Jesus as president. Like I think he's the one that has, and again, I get in these conversations, you get into nuance, and it really makes you just throw my hands in the air and just say like, "Come, Lord Jesus,"
I know,
because he is the only one that fully embodies grace and truth.
For sure.
And that's where this gets in the weeds for somebody. For like, it's like you kind of have to take a stand on one or the other.
Yeah.
If you're gonna if you're gonna build like a societal structure, it can really can't be fluid like grace needs to be, and be rigid like truth needs to be.
Right.
It has to be embodied.
I think, for sure. And I think where I get it is, I mean, based on my, my advocacy for Joe Biden, it's obviously that I'm a little right leaning, but I think where I am is that I have to, even as it relates to the gospel, right? Like there are deal breakers, and I do have them, right? But the more I allow myself to get down to go down the right-leaning highway that leads me way right, it's always the gospel that brings me back to the center, where it's like, okay, there are some sort of thoughts on the left, specifically about how we treat the poor, how we treat the needy. That's actually a strong point, and I realize that it's actually not. Like we don't, like from a conservative perspective, we don't have a great record on some of these things, right? From a social perspective, and like it's always the gospel that brings me back towards the middle, that I can actually see the value on a left and a right thing.
Jesus was way too conservative to be liberal, and way too liberal to be conservative.
Right.
Yeah, if I can bring in just like an illustration from like last night, I was uptown working with the Salvation Army. We fed about like 100 people out in their parking lot, and I think liberals would say we just need to, these people need us. We just need to keep feeding them forever. They're going to stay in that state, and we'll just keep feeding them. Conservatives would say, get a job, and and I think as the church, we need to kind of be right in the middle and say, like, how can we ultimately help these people?
Yeah.
Like just giving them handouts over and over and over again in the long term and big picture isn't really helping them.
Right.
Yep.
We have to create jobs. We have to have to play the long game, and so I see that's kind of where we stand as the church, as like we step back and say, okay, what does God really want to do in these people's lives? And no matter what's popular or unpopular, what the mob says, I want to ultimately try to help this person to live the best life possible.
For sure. And it's like
don't vote, which we'll get to in just a moment.
Right. Yes. Yeah. We get.
This is important, though.
It is. But you're doing two things there, right? Like you're actually meeting an immediate need.
Yes.
But you're also identifying and addressing a long-term need as well too, right? So
so for the immediate need, it's a handout,
Yeah.
but ultimately it needs to be a handout.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
All of these questions, though, really are about meeting needs and what's the best way to go about that.
Right.
You know, whether we're talking about the homeless or middle class or upper class.
For sure.
There's go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just going to jump in and say, I think the church is actually discovering, thinking of the big picture history of the church, that we're in the midst of a project that God has been working for a long time, and it's not going to be a snap solution. Like, he solved things when Jesus died and rose again, and he is returning. Jesus is returning, but we're in the midst of a project working with God. So generation after generation, season after season, empire after empire. I mean, God's working his plan, and the church is learning to partner with him. It's messy. We think it's going to be solved by getting the right party into leadership, and it'll be solved in a decade. But no, it won't, and it won't even be solved in my generation. Like, this is something long-term we're working with, and will humanity ever learn? Well, to some degree we will eventually, but we're still going to be humanity. Yeah. Like, God's restoring all creation, and it's not something that he's gonna solve in a moment.
Yeah.
He did solve it. The playing out of it.
Right.
We're seeing it. We're living it. Our grandkids are going to keep living it. Like, we feel like everything hangs. Every generation thinks everything hangs on them.
And this is it.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a new iteration of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you zoom out, I mean, you do get that picture. Like, if you take from, Christ's ministry, then his death and resurrection, and then launching the church, the church has not been flawless in how we've kind of rolled out the rule and reign of Jesus. However, it hasn't been impotent, and that there has been an effect, even with human progress, for instance. I know we've kind of had some of these conversations with the Revelation series that we're doing at the church, talking about, what's God's ultimate plan for the restoration of all things, and like, how big is the gap between where we are, when Jesus returns, and what he's going to do to bring like fulfillment, right? And I think we think a lot of the times in terms of, this is abhorrent, this life is so messed up, and then Jesus is going to come and zap, everything's going to be better, and there's going to be this huge gap of development between the problems that we have now and the way he solves it ultimately. But what if though, it's actually, and we're going to get existential here, but what if God actually wants to partner with Jesus followers through the power and the brilliance of the Holy Spirit, where he gives us the ability to affect civilization and continue to see it progress into that picture of Revelation 21-22, where there is the new heaven and the new earth. And, I do believe Jesus is coming back and he's going to fulfill things ultimately. However, I wonder if we have abdicated our responsibility in partnering with him and seeing ourselves as the agents, like the church, as the agents of the ones who are supposed to be developing things. And if you, to your point, if you zoom out, you do see how, the best parts, like, again, I think one of the big problems we have right now is, back to your point early on, like, we're just freaking out about everything, and we're losing sight of the fact that inarguably, life is better for the average person now than it has ever been in human history.
Extreme poverty has been cut in half in the last 20 years.
Right. So it's not to say that's
and
not
a big
problem.
part of that's the church.
Then that's my point.
Exactly.
My point is the church, like Judeo and then specifically Christian values, that is the reason why, like, racism has even become an issue, and slavery has been identified as an issue, and it's Christianity. The fact that everybody's created equal, like, that's a Christian doctrine. Like, these are things that have come through the kingdom and are positively influencing civilization, and that's I think a thing we're missing now is the enemy maybe causes us to lose sight of the fact that it's actually Jesus, that any of the good progress that has happened, you can connect back to him.
Yeah. Kate, can I make a prediction here on our podcast?
Yep.
I'm not going to say it's a prophecy, because I'm going to say it's a prediction. I predict that there's going to be a day when people will be grappling with this, that the end is more about beauty than it is about perfection.
Yep. Well, I think we make a false assumption. Like when we read the Bible, we read Genesis 1 and 2 or Revelation 21:22, that's complete. It's not complete. There's still development happening. Like, why did God say to the first humans, like, here's your job, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it? Subdue what if it's perfect?
Yeah, there you go.
It's implied that there's going to be things pushing back against you, and your job as my image bearers is to bring dominion and order into the chaos. And I mean, this is right at the heart of why politics are such a explosive conversation, because it's in our DNA.
Right.
God hardwired us to care about dominion and order in chaos.
Right.
And we keep fighting about what's the best way to do that. And I think, again, a case for Jesus as president. Like that's the role. I think that's the role of the church. And
well, I think part of the problem of not being able to calm down is we think it is perfection.
Right.
Like if you can't come with the perfect answer, then shut up.
Right.
Like it's like, no, wait a second. If I can't hear people, we're never going to see beauty. We're never going to see what could come out of this if we can't talk about it.
And we get offended at the hypocrisy of, we know you, like you're like, if you're coming at me with a kind of a left agenda and you like setting it before me like this is the perfect solution to all of our problems, I see through that. I'm like, give me a break.
Yeah. By the way, did I say shut up? I'm sorry, everybody.
Oh, we already lost all the people that are going to be offended anyway.
An American is saying he's sorry.
Yeah, how about that?
I know.
How about that?
I do live in New Brunswick, you know.
So we'll come. I think that's someday I want to have a conversation about dreaming about how could God, like, letting ourselves just like whiteboard. Like, let's imagine, like, how could God maybe be dreaming of bringing his kingdom on earth? And maybe we'll get back to this a little bit later, but, why do we think that the work of God is magic?
Right.
Like when we think about miracles and stuff, because we can't explain it scientifically, we put it in this category of magic. There'll come a day where we actually understand, like, physiologically and naturally, because right now it's supernatural because we don't understand it. But like there'll be what we'll call a natural explanation to the resurrection of like how God did that, like how he gave Jesus, an everlasting body, and what he did to overwhelm death. And like for us, we have it in this category because it's so massive and hard to wrap our heads around. It's magic. But there's going to be a day where obviously there is a way that God did that. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm getting way too like
it's a little nerdy, but
way too nerdy.
I'm with you.
But it's like, but I mean, why do we think when it says like we're gonna get new bodies, right? Like, why do we just chalk that into the category of magic and not like God as a designer and a developer who's gonna like put our consciousness in something else and our soul in some other. Anyway, sorry.
So why should we spoil our ballot?
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Let's keep. Spoil our ballot or not abstain. Those are two different things in my opinion.
Right.
So
they are.
Now you're messing my mind up.
You pick.
Okay.
Which way you want to go?
Okay. Because I'm talking about. Hey, let's pretend to spoil the ballot. I'll go that way. No. I am just saying, along with John Mayer. Me and all my friends, we just know that the fight ain't fair. So we're waiting on the world to change. Yeah. Waiting. I just think that's what we need to do right there. No. Wow, this is a tough one, guys, because I think that I would say a good argument for spoiling the ballot or abstaining is that you want to call into focus that there are things worth dying for, and a political party is not one of them. That we're really confused about where our loyalties are, especially as believers in Jesus, as Christians. It's tricky for us because most of the Bible was written to people in exile who didn't have a voice, and the much of the prophecies, and then of course Jesus coming as the Messiah to an exiled people. And as a representative of an exiled people, actually gave his life, as a ransom for all nations. And when he rose again, he didn't arise and say, this is not really good probably either, I'm going to offend somebody. He didn't arise saying, yeah, we should all be Jews.
Right. Yes.
Right.
He arose and said, hey, no, now you can enter the kingdom of heaven, which is people from all nations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His choice was to purchase for himself a people from all nations who will reign on the earth. So we serve a God who is not fussy about what political nation you align with. He is calling that nation to surrender to King Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jesus, our King, is so secure that he doesn't demand, no, you need to sign up for this political party.
Right.
And so where am I trying to go with this, since I've had like 5 minutes to come up with this argument?
5.
I am saying that there's an argument for this to make a point that we need a new day, literally in every nation, definitely in the Western culture, to awaken people that whatever party you vote for, ultimately you're not really voting for the king. You're voting for
Their
a
policy.
substitute
Like
for the king
a shadow
who's
of-
Okay.
under Jesus.
Got you.
Like
Yeah.
we all recognize, we need to recognize once again in culture, Jesus is king over it all, and he's actually king over political parties that I don't agree with. And somehow
Right.
in him, there's space for that. And I'll just throw this one argument in there. I'm intrigued. I haven't dug into this much, but in Revelation chapter 6, it talks about the kings of the earth running and hiding because of the wrath of the one who's on the throne and the Lamb. And then when you fast forward to the last couple chapters of Revelation, the kings of the earth are bringing their treasures
Yes.
into the city of God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So kings of the earth still existed in John's vision.
Yeah.
It's not like they all disappeared in Revelation chapter 6.
Yeah.
Somehow in the economy of God, in the new creation, there was room for kings of the earth.
Yeah. Rulers. Yeah.
And so somehow there's room for that.
And the question too is that are all of us rulers and kings of the earth? I mean, that's a whole other.
Well, it is, but then if you say rulers over what? Like there's space within, under King Jesus, he is not the kind of king that says you all have to be me.
Right.
He says, no, because I am king, you all get to be you, and I love the variety of the expression. Why would John even recognize
Right.
when he saw I'm going on, man. But why would John recognize when he saw the vision before the throne that identified these were all from many nations? How would he know that?
Yeah.
How would he know that they were from every tribe, tongue, and nation if it wasn't obvious to him?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So are you going to vote?
No.
Yeah.
So
as the pragmatist at the table,
yeah.
let me jump in here.
Yeah, go for it.
I think we're, kind of going back to the scripture that Brent mentioned about rendering unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, and I think there's two different categories there, and we're called as Christians to be salt and light, and part of being salt is keeping things from going bad. And kind of fighting evil when we see it.
That's good, yeah.
I think that's the role when we're deciding. For a long time in my younger years, I just didn't. I could care less about politics. Didn't vote at all. And looking back now, I think I was just being lazy. I think it's part of my Christian duty.
Yeah.
To vote. Even though none of the candidates are perfect or my ideal or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's good for leaders to line themselves up with particular parties and get locked into that.
Yeah, I don't either.
And
Yes.
state that publicly.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do feel like it is my duty as a Christian to vote.
Yeah.
Well, I think-
So vote, but live like you didn't.
Okay, I'll take that.
Well, there's some truth to that, because I think what you're getting at is that I think, like, if you look at it statistically, like there is a large portion of the Christian world, specifically in the West, that actually doesn't get involved in politics, and maybe that they don't even vote. So in a way, they are kind of voting, right? So you get into that, right? So I think I'm not in that mindset, because I actually think that by by not voting, you're by removing yourself from that role and that privilege. Like people fought and died for that.
That's an important.
That's actually like you're
for sure.
by sort of backing away and saying whatever happens. I don't agree with that either. I actually believe that, if you look historically, like it doesn't take a rocket scientist, if you have any morality in you, to look at the way that culture has gone, to see the degradation. And I think a large part of it is because the church and believers have actually like stood back and sort of let that sort of thing happen, right? Like, and from a policy standpoint, like specifically, I mean, not the least of which is just the right to life and all of that stuff that's been sort of pervasive now and is sort of now ingrained in the DNA of the culture a little bit. But I honestly believe it's because the church has been sort of like removed and abdicated their role in society, and specifically in this regard, that we've actually allowed agendas and ideologies that are sort of anti-life, anti-God, it's not just about what we believe, but it's actually things that are actually like good for us.
So you make a good point, and this actually is the genesis of why I wanted to have this conversation in the first place. So I do agree with you on the, if the church didn't abdicate its responsibility, maybe some of these ideologies that aren't so offensive to us as Christians and so destructive as we believe legitimately, like, the abortion issue does matter. However, it's much bigger in scope than like being pro-life, for instance, is much bigger in scope than just abortion.
Sure.
And I think Christians need to like wake up to that and say, like, if you're going to be pro-life, let's have the whole conversation and not just kind of die on this one angle of it, which again, very much matters and matters to God. But we've oversimplified it and abdicated the whole scope of the conversation. So, however, so you talk about the church, if we hadn't abdicated our role in, Canada or the U.S., for instance, then we wouldn't have to be fighting. And we'll come back to the U.S. particularly in a second. But one of the things that kind of stirred this conversation in me was I started getting a bunch of emails and invitations to, from the St. John Ministerial to participate in some stuff to rally around a certain conservative agenda.
Right.
And in my mind, it was, or in my heart even, my reaction was, this isn't great, because the St. John Ministerial, I don't know if the average St. Johner would even know what the St. John Ministerial is, wouldn't think that the church in St. John has any type of unified voice whatsoever. The presence of the church in St. John is not unified or aligned in such a way that like it's this force to be reckoned with, and the people just know the church is active and on the move of St. John's. We've been by and large, as a collection of churches in this region, pretty quiet. I think legitimately.
Right.
And then now we're rallying together to kind of unify a voice, and we're choosing to get in the ring on like a political conversation when I think the time to be in the ring was beforehand. And so we talk about abdication, like, my question and my big hang up is, I do believe we're supposed to be salt and light, and I do believe that the church is supposed to be influencing policy and influencing values in the nation. However, if we wait until, if we think that the arena to best do that is through politics and through government and through casting a vote and lobbying, I feel like we're missing maybe the way that Jesus wants to bring his kingdom on earth. I'm not saying you shouldn't vote. I'm just saying if we zoom out and we think about the role of the church, maybe voting is that's like a secondary issue. And if we just made good Christians and we just we're out there anyway, influencing people, peer to peer, family to family, community to community. That's the way that values are supposed to, Christian values are supposed to be expressed. They're supposed to be expressed through relationship, not through policy. And that's my big fear is we have fully committed to fighting for our values by way of policy and politics, and not through person to person, and not through relationship, and not through the hard work of embodiment. And that's what makes me kind of go, oh,
Right.
I wonder if we're missing it. So, like, let me pick on the American situation. So I think to your point, Mike, like the values that Donald Trump allows to have a place, I align more with that. Like just apples to apples, the things that he's going to allow to happen in America, which I actually would vote that every country should get at least like one vote for how America rolls out, because this affects all of us. So like, can we do like you have the Electoral College? Can we do like the World College and like let the world chime in too? Because this very much affects us. But you know, I get thinking about where was I going with that? So I got on a bit of a sidetrack. So, to your point. So like, yeah, I do agree as a Christian. If I'm just apples to apples, the things that the Trump administration is going to allow to happen, I identify more with. I'm like, yeah, I care more about the things that are going to happen through this administration, and I'm more concerned about some of the things that are coming from the left. You know, I heard a great podcast a few weeks ago by a guy named Dan Carlin. You know Dan Carlin's Hardcore History?
No.
He's like a journalist and a historian, very smart, but he made a good case for kind of just putting it out there, like on how to understand this current election and that kind of thing, and the difference between Biden and Trump. Anyway, it's a long-winded answer, Dan. I'm maybe this end of the table is kind of good, but
it's getting heavier now.
So I'm concerned about Biden. I align with Trump. However, I'm concerned with Trump in a different way. And I fear, back to your salt and light point, I fear that standing with him, the church aligning with him, covers our light in such a way that the people that we're trying to reach and witness, because like his policy aside, because his personality and the character associated with it and the complexity of what it means to stand with that administration, I feel like it cuts the limb that we want to be sitting on off with the world we're trying to reach. It's a long way of saying is supporting Trump and supporting his values. I'm asking this question legitimately. I haven't totally resolved this. Is supporting Trump and aligning with him, even though it's going to allow certain values to be expressed, is that worth the cost to our witness to the people we're actually trying to reach?
Yeah, and I was talking about like voting for Trump, not necessarily aligning. And so, and I think there's a difference. Like, I think Franklin Graham has aligned himself with Trump. I
Fair
think
enough.
Billy Graham was very smart to say, I am America's pastor.
Yes.
And no matter, you know, he, as an individual, privately, he voted. He obviously voted for somebody and didn't vote for another person.
Yep.
But he was willing to be the pastor to both political parties.
Right.
And I think kind of going back to what you said, I think that's like ultimately the wiser choice.
Yeah.
For us as the church, it's important to be involved, but we don't want to buy in and kind of align ourselves totally with one party, because that's
And unfortunately, like that's happened.
Yeah,
and
I know.
that's the scary part. And it's like, honestly, is it worth consideration for the church to say, actually, we're gonna, because we know that this has completely, like the fact that you have, like, if we have to say, well, you know, we're gonna vote for Trump and give a 10-minute explanation as to why, and there are very good reasons why, legitimately, but you just lost your ability to talk. You spent your change you'd have with someone to have a conversation about Jesus on why you shouldn't judge me too quickly for the fact that I voted for Trump. And I guess that really concerns me when I think about the witness of the American church. I think, like, to a guy named David French, I was listening to a debate. I think you guys listened to some of it. You know, I chillingly think he was right when he said, I think the church is going to rue the day that, you know, 20 years from now, we so willingly aligned ourselves, and I'm just saying, and again, not saying everyone, but
Right.
by and large, you talk to the average American non-Christian, their assumption is evangelicals are pro-Trump,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I think you're okay. So
I think Trump has been misrepresented a lot.
I agree,
in the
100%.
media,
I
too. And
totally-
So there's a difference between.
But it's perception reality when it comes to our witness.
But then, here's the thing. So you take.
Let's
you
fight.
take-
Let's go.
No. But you take that position
Yeah.
right to the end. How do you not end up at the church abdicating its role in society and in government? How do you not end up at, like, if you say I'm not going to vote, or I'm not going to vote for Trump, or so I'm not going to vote. I'm not gonna actually pick a side and fully defend that side, right? So how do you not end up in an abdicating role, like where we actually get removed from?
Yeah, looking back over the centuries, where democracy is sort of a new political idea in the history of the world.
Yes.
I mean, as far as voting your officials in. So for a long period of world history, you were ruled by monarchs that were apparently appointed by God. Like they were just supposed to be in charge, and the people held them accountable for the way they ruled. There wasn't an assumption that this man or woman is ruling us because they're perfect.
Right.
There was an assumption that we need a king, we need a queen,
Right.
and we as the citizens are going to hold them accountable. So it was messy. Like citizens have really messy ways of holding their kings and queens accountable, right? It's revolution, right? It's not an easy process at all. We don't have democracy because it's perfect. It was just a better idea.
Right.
Someone has said that democracy is the worst political system ever,
Yeah,
except
C.S.
for
Lewis.
all the other systems that
Right.
we've come
Yeah,
up
he's
with.
like, it's
Which
the
is
best.
very
It's the
interesting,
best of
right?
all the bad
So-
options.
So I'm just saying that what ends up happening, the answer is messy.
Yeah.
Because in the end, the right is going to, not the right, the
Correct.
good is going to win, but it's going to be messy.
Right.
Democracy is a more tidy, like it's a
Sure
more
it is.
organized way to actually move as a society and hold our rulers accountable.
Yeah.
We're foolish to think that because someone is in office, that means that they are perfect or that everything they're going to do is exactly right. We do, even if we vote and put someone in office, we still abdicate our responsibility by unplugging them.
Right.
Well, there they are. They're in. We're all good for the next 4 years.
Right.
Yes, and I
unplug
think
in our
that's the bigger.
attitudes,
That's
like,
sure.
I would love to, like, I think the biggest thing we as Christians need to figure out is how do we get beyond, like, as long as this is, should you vote, and once you're done, your job's done. It's way too superficial for the kingdom.
Yeah, that's
Right.
right. It's
And
not
the
enough.
kingdom,
It's not enough.
The kingdom has to drive deeper,
Yeah.
and I just think it's worth asking the question too when it comes to, the Trump thing particularly. And this is why, again, I'm not saying one way or the other of how I'm on this. I'm just trying to make an argument for why I think it is worth consideration for the church to, like, in America anyway, like evangelicals to step back from the fact that they're laying down, they're really dying on the Trump hill.
And progressives are dying on the other hill.
For
Like,
sure,
it's the
for
same
sure.
thing,
And
yeah.
what the progressives do, but like
yeah.
as far as Christians, you ever get
Well,
into
I'm talking
something?
about the progressive end of the church, though. It's just exactly the same.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. Evangelicals,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wonder though, like for both of those sides, for instance, let's just be fair, because it's not like you're right.
Right.
I just wonder if the situation, especially in the U.S., you get the media spin, you get the current kind of zeitgeist of culture. I just wonder if it's so messy that is there a point at which it's important that we just kind of step back and wash our hands a little bit so that we can enter back. Like you ever like be doing a project and you start making such a mess of it that you actually have to like step back and reset in order to do it correctly. And like this isn't happening in a vacuum.
Right.
You take the, it would be one thing if when Bill Clinton had his affair, the church were like, well, the president's not my pastor, right? Back in the end of the 90s. If they did that, we might have more of a voice this time on saying, well, the president's not my pastor, so it doesn't bother me that he slept with porn stars and paid them off to be quiet. And it doesn't bother me that, you know, he, like these things, these character issues, because they called foul on character before and they said character matters.
Yeah.
And now that it's,
I think one of the key differences, which is where I disagree with French listening to that, was like everything with Trump, they're talking about a past tense kind of thing.
Yes.
No, and it was a present tense.
That's fair enough. And
so I don't believe in like holding people accountable for everything they've done in their whole life, you know, going back 25 years.
That's canceled.
Very much agree with you on that. However, I don't know. Let's just full stop say, even if some of that was present tense, would the church back off and be like, nope, not my president? I don't think they would. I think as long as he's, I think the truth is, because he's allowing Christian agendas to have its place, Christians can look the other way on him. And that's that. I think I get why we I can
and
too.
Looking at it cynically, you could say that those are just political moves. I have no idea why I feel this way, but I just sense that there's something a little deeper there with him too, though, that he does have a genuine respect for the gospel. Yeah. That there's something in there. God is working something in there. I think it's in the early stages, and it might have a long way to go.
I agree with you on that. I actually know some pastors that are very involved with him and have had behind closed doors conversations about spiritual things with Donald Trump. And there legitimately is some stuff going on in him. However, that doesn't uncomplicate the conversation
totally
about our witness.
Let me ask you this. So 20 years ago or 25 years ago with Clinton, that whole thing, what if the church is actually more correct today than they were back then? Right? What if this is actually a resetting? I'm asking the question.
They were wrong.
Maybe they were wrong
ostracize him.
To just say this. Maybe it is the correct position to say the president isn't my pastor. The president isn't my moral authority.
Yeah, but my point is, as long as we have to be in this complex arena of explaining or even trying to figure out, were we right, were we wrong, is it right, and having to qualify all this. I just think we're getting swallowed in it and losing our voice for the things that actually we really wish we could say to the people we're trying to reach. I just wonder if the cost to our witness is too high at this point.
I think Amy Barrett has been doing a good job of kind of walking that middle ground. She's been great. She is managing to represent Christian character very well in the middle, like right in the middle of the arena, and she's kind of winning. She's winning people from the other side because of, and so I think we can have moral clarity and Christian charity at the same time. Right. Like I think a lot of times those things get divided, and it's like, well, you're gonna like love people, or you're going to have the truth, and it's always that tension of both. It can, and if we, and that's how we have to approach the world, like with both of those things in tension.
100% agree.
I think where I sit with the witness portion of it, I think it's a lot more nuanced. Is like, okay, so if you are going to support publicly a guy like Donald Trump, I think you can't just leave it at that. You have to understand why that would impact somebody's witness. So you have to look at things like, how is this man being portrayed? Why is it? Like, is he really that bad? You know, because you look at the last 4 years, not even just the last 4 years, but even for the election cycle. So the last 6 years or so since he was the nominee, right? He's been overwhelmingly in the public sphere been portrayed a certain way, right? So it doesn't in a way I have to hold the portrayal and the public ethos and the public mindset of a guy that's actually been portrayed one way, and I have to actually ask the question, is he really that way, or is it really, you know, and you sort of get into this conspiracy theory and all that stuff like that. But I think that, is he really that way, or is he actually another way? is there something else? What's really at the core of who he is?
I think that's fair.
As a believer, I have to sort of say, I think there's something very like Jesus that would actually stand with somebody who the mob or the greater society would actually be anti whoever that guy is.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's Trump,
Yeah.
but I would actually stand against a mob and actually come out in support of a guy. Right, that would actually stand with him.
That's super fair to say, and it's wise. However, when you're trying to reach the mob, it gets really complicated, right? Like I think that's the complexity I feel in all this is like as long as you're standing with him,
right?
I feel like you've sawed off your ability to have any influence with the angry mob.
I think as long as you say, though, what I'm really looking for is the truth. I'm not really on one side. I just want to know, like, what is, if everything's really distorted right now.
And that's really, truth is really difficult.
I just want to get to the truth.
Yeah. I wanted to just speak into that real quick. Scripture says that it's with your heart that you believe and with your mouth that you confess that Jesus is Lord, that you're saved. Like, human beings are designed to believe something in their heart and then speak it out. So in many of our social circles, we call that just speaking your truth. Well,
right.
Like speaking your truth is what you believe in your heart, and that's what you speak with your mouth. Things can feel true to you, and they're not true.
Yes.
But you can be really good at speaking it. And I think sometimes it gets lost. Trump is amazing at speaking boldly and candidly what he feels to be true.
And a lot of that aligns with what Christians feel to be true.
Right. So, but we really have to shake ourselves awake and say, that's not enough to be good at speaking what you feel is true. Like, we really have a culture that it's coming to fruition. We're seeing how foolish that is. Because there's actually truth behind.
Yeah.
Like, in the backdrop of all that is what is actually truth.
Yes.
So when you talk about the truth, like, we need to recapture, like, I think many people on the street don't think about the fact that they actually are acting out what they believe is true. That we actually, like, that we have the ability to speak clearly. People have relinquished that because they don't believe they have it. They don't believe they have a voice. The truth is, everybody does have a voice. It's, are you willing to actually put your life on the line to let your heart believe truth? So what Christians know in embracing the gospel is that's the only way they could get saved. The only way they could be saved is to be courageous enough to actually let their heart embrace the truth. So where I'm going with this is there's a movement in culture that says, okay, who I vote for matters a lot. But I'm actually awake to the fact that it's more important to align my heart with the truth and learn to speak it than it is to make sure I put the right vote in. Because you could vote for the candidate you like and still live your life really unplugged from that reality. Like, our communities actually get changed by people regardless of what they voted for. They own their responsibility to connect their heart with truth.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, and even churches, like, and then it goes from there.
And this can be a launch point. I mean, and that's the good news about this is it can be a launch point. Like, my heart really, even for us having this conversation, letting people like from our church or whatever, who's ever watching this, like, be involved in it is like, we have to actually learn to jump into these conversations and figure out like what,
totally.
Like, and if this is a simple thing for you, you're not in it. Like, you haven't taken seriously what it means to follow Jesus. You haven't actually, like, you don't know even enough. Like, I'm telling you, even for what I understand, again, I'm not Yoda or anything, but like, this is really, really complicated stuff. And we have to actually know what we believe.
Yeah. And I think to God, prayer is more important than voting.
Agreed.
Yep.
Like, if you vote and don't pray, well, that's really foolish.
Yes. Yep. Yes. And that's the thing. And this has the ability to call the question.
if you
pray and don't vote. That's also
it's,
very
it's,
foolish.
yeah,
It
it's-
is.
Yeah.
That's his kingdom coming on
But
earth as it is
but
in
it
heaven,
is
right?
it is important. So that, like, this brings up a great point though. Like, what's first things first,
Yeah.
right? And that's
right.
and that's my opinion on the. That's why where I'm coming at. And again, like for people who are like, well, is Pastor Brent a leftist? No, not at all. Like I lean right. I get why people are supporting Trump. I also get why people can't vote for him, and I get why people can't vote for Biden. I couldn't either. I mean, not that I literally can't, but
Literally.
even if I could, I
can't vote.
wouldn't.
I'm glad I don't
I
have to
wouldn't. There's just
vote in the
there's zero
American
way.
election.
But like, what is and this is where I think the church really needs to get a start. Is like, what is first things first? Like, what matters more to us? Like, and complicating our witness should be a conversation we're having. Also, the bigger conversation. Let's shift into this gear before we're done. Is how do we think when Jesus said, okay, he's resurrected, he's standing with his disciples, he's on the mount, he's about to ascend, and he goes, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. What did he have in mind for that? And how do we think that that's supposed to be primarily expressed as Christians? And are we skipping steps by trying to express that in the political, governmental arena and missing more important first things first, like seek ye first the kingdom of God? Where does that seeking start?
Yeah.
Well, the Roman Empire was changed from the bottom up.
Yes.
Through the hearts of people.
Yeah.
And I think that's like ultimately what Jesus had in mind, and that's kind of ultimately what the gospel does. And it's happened through history in various countries that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Most of the countries where our backgrounds would be from were pagan countries that became Christian
Through grassroots.
Yeah.
Not through legislation. And in fact, when the legislation, like if you look at Constantine and the Roman Empire, like that actually like really neutered Christianity in a major way. Like the fire kind of got a big dose of water put on it because it became like legislated and it became the the national religion.
The way Jesus operated, like I think sometimes as the church we pay, we've been saying the mob, but the crowd.
Yeah.
Like we it's kind of counterintuitive, but I think Jesus dealt with the crowd by not paying attention to the crowd in a way.
Yes.
We always have to get our cues from the Father
right.
through the Holy Spirit.
That's a good word.
And not through what's the crowd think? So I'm going to try to
react,
meet them halfway.
That's it right there. That sort of makes me push against that sort of like what everybody else thinks, right? That,
like even the witness conversation.
Even the witness conversation.
Fair enough.
Exactly.
Right. Like I gotta really hold to something, because I gotta believe that we already know there's this reality that not everyone's going to be able to go with us. Right. Like even though the door is open for everybody, not everyone's going to be able to get there. So I can't cater or placate every idol. For one, you would drive yourself nuts. So I got to hold to what's true. I got to hold to what I believe is what the Lord is doing. So that's that's what I have to give my energy to, and I have to sort of like put everything else sort of in everything else in perspective and in a sort of a secondary place, right?
Yeah, we have to follow Jesus and lead people, and often we find ourselves following people and then trying to lead Jesus.
But, yes, and we get it. Everything's that's my point. That's the tension I feel is like we haven't actually done the groundwork to be able to have the right influential conversations. So like when I see, when I get these emails saying, "Hey, we're gonna go support this," or like let's be conservatives together, or all that kind of like what. Yeah. That's great, and I might even agree agree with your platform entirely. Yeah. But unfortunately, we haven't established the arena to have that right conversation.
And you might feel differently if we had a track record.
That's right.
And that was different from that, where this wasn't sort of like the loudest thing that we're saying. What if we were loud with our justice issues? What if we were loud with our advocacy for the poor?
Yes.
Right? Like, or what if we were loud? Like, what if we were actually really salt and light in a louder way? And then the political part was just a part of it, and then you would feel better about it.
And that's my fear in all this is that the church, like we've been loud on the wrong things, or at least we seem loud on the wrong things because we haven't dealt with some of the more primary things. And so it's just like, we cannot approach this from an idealistic standpoint. It has to be actuality. Like how is this coming across? So I take what Sean Foyt's doing in the Let Us Worship. On the one hand, I respect that big time. Go get him, man. Like, fight the power. On the other hand, there's a part of me that's like, you're in Indianapolis and you've got 4,000 Christians there,
or 10,000,
or 10,000. And it's like, on the one hand, as a Christian who I hate, let's not even pop the whole coronavirus can right now, but there's so much about how this has rolled out that just drives me, it makes me angry, honestly, from anyway, I look at that as on so many levels, and I'm like, I celebrate so much about what you're doing right now. However, I also know there's a gap between the people, there's a whole bunch of people that we would say we're trying to reach. And again, I know I'm back to the mob thing. I just wonder if that's further dividing our voice from the people we're trying to reach by getting in there and rallying and protesting for our rights and let us worship. And it's like, you know what the lost are hearing right now? They aren't hearing for God so loved the world that he came to with his only son, that whoever believes in him, he's after you. They're not hearing an evangelistic message. They're seeing Christians standing up for their own rights. And that concerns me. And it's like,
and it's messy because there are people that are becoming Christians at those.
Yes,
at those
yes,
and,
for sure.
And so it's not I can totally understand both sides.
Me too.
But do you think? Okay, so just to ask an honest question, do you think with that line you're being nice?
Yeah, perhaps.
Right.
And again, I'm not look. I'm being totally political here right now. Totally. I'm keeping my cards pretty close to my chest here. I'm just trying to be the devil's advocate or Jesus' advocate. I don't even know which. in this conversation, just to get the whole scope of the thing, because these are the things that should concern us. It should concern us that the things that Sean Foyt's concerned about should concern us too.
For sure.
And the reason that he's out there, that we should be with him in that. At the same time, it should also concern us. We should also say, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What?
And I think we should very much consider all the facets of this, all the things of it. But I honestly believe it is incorrect to think that there's going to be a nice, neat, and tidy solution and a way of expression.
100%.
You can't completely do everything.
There was nothing nice about Jesus.
Correct.
Jesus was not nice ever. He was kind.
And you have to, if you're calling somebody out, you have to call out everybody. I don't
Fair
know
enough.
if you saw that, all the people in the streets after the Lakers.
And
it's
exactly.
Okay, it's okay to worship the Lakers, but it's not.
You can't worship Jesus. Totally.
I know.
Totally. But again, it's like there's this quintessential element to being a Christian that is self-sacrifice and laying down my rights. And that's what strikes me as concerning a little bit when we're standing up for rights. It's very un-Christ-like.
Right.
Because he's the one who did not consider equality with God as something to be grasped, but instead gave them up for us all. And that's the hard part, is how do I follow the one who actually had every right to protest and didn't?
And I think that verse out of Micah is really, really helpful for us as Christians, and also in people's understanding of what's going on. Whereas, we want to do justice, but there's not a period after that.
Right.
We want to.
Right. We want to walk away.
We want to do justice, but we also have to love mercy.
Right.
And we have to walk humbly.
Yeah.
And those three things in tension. Help us to do justice in the right way. And so a lot of what we're being categorized as justice right now kind of leaves off it just puts a period after do justice.
Yes.
Right.
And
it's like what you said last time you were on the podcast, when you said there's a huge appetite for virtue signaling and not a huge appetite for actual virtue.
Right.
And it's
the problem, justice without Jesus is just us. And when it's just us, we mess it up every time.
Totally. And that's the thing. I think if I hope like people, if there's still people listening, hopefully they're at this zone where they understand the nuance and complexity of all of this, and they are able to like, I guess, press into these things further than just kind of the super, the world and the media and the kind of cultural vortex is only, it's going to keep you at a superficial level, which is not kingdom.
Yep.
Right. Right. So could I just talk about King Jesus for a second
Please.
on this?
Please.
Let's do it.
That
Please.
it was never, it was never was, and
Lobby
never,
for our president. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It never was. It isn't now. It won't ever be easy to follow Jesus.
Yep.
Amen.
But
Yep.
it was and is and will be simple to follow Jesus.
Good
Right.
word. Yep.
Yep.
But you have to want to.
Right.
He doesn't make it easy. We want to make it easy by saying
That's
if
good.
we elect the right person into office
Yep.
and have the right
Yeah.
philosophy, then it's easy.
Yes.
No. It can't ever be easy. It has to be personal.
That is huge.
It has to be. I was thinking about, no one comes to the Father except through me. So, well, that's exclusive. Say, no, it's inclusive for everybody who wants to get to the Father.
Right.
Yep.
Like, you have to want to get to the Father. Like
Yes.
that's like, do you have a desire to be in the kingdom and live the kingdom of God? Then Jesus is the way to do that.
You make a huge point here that I think's really important is as we dive into these conversations and the complexity of it, there is like following Jesus is very simple if you're brave enough to do that.
That's you. It's about will you
And
go there?
Will you go there, and will you do the work to actually check the real motivations of your politics or your reaction?
For sure.
And it's like, I think one of the points, and if anyone's wondering what we're referencing, there was a debate between Eric Metaxas and David French, both Christian men, at John Brown University. Really good. They both made really great points. Like they're just super, super. I got both of them. But I think one of the things that David French was saying is, behind all the rallying for Trump in Christians, he says, I think there's a lot of fear. And it's fear that's motivating a lot of it. It's fear that you're going to lose your rights for civil liberties. It's fear for the unborn. Right. And those are very valid things to be concerned about. But do we have a spirit of fear? Like should Christians should be the last people who are operating out of a spirit of fear. Yeah. I mean, concern, compassion, justice, all those things for sure. But if fear is the motivation, I don't know if you're following Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's
and
to your
full
point.
disclosure, that's tough to confess that. It's tough to
It's
tough to
tough
fall
to be
on your
aware
face
of.
and say, I'm scared.
It's tough to be even aware of. I think a lot of the time we think we're doing the right thing and we're motivated by the right things, but there's really something beneath the surface that's driving us.
At our very best, we often have mixed motives, for sure.
For sure.
For sure we do.
And that part of my even bringing that up was you were mentioning the pressure tactics. Well, you should do this because you're a Christian. You should do this because you're a pastor. That always makes me cringe. Because it's like, that's not the way the kingdom works. It's not about pressuring one another. If I'm pressuring you to anything, I should say, I'm pressuring you to get close enough to Jesus to find out what he's saying and doing.
Yes.
And then be bold enough to do it.
And
make mistakes at it. And do it, make it messy. It's going to be.
And perhaps we can do that together.
Right.
Perhaps.
Yeah, and it's not about me like when you start to feel pressured by a group, that's when you really need, you do need to check and say, okay, why am I doing this? And do I even have to give in to this pressure?
Yeah. Yes.
Like one of the things I've loved about Mike's and my friendship over the years is I've watched Mike in a lot of different scenarios. Mike's had an active ministry since, I don't know, late 80s.
Yeah.
I remember, actually, it's funny, remember sitting with Mike over coffee in Sussex, New Brunswick, and him saying to me, Dan, I think God might be calling me to preach. And Mike was an English teacher at a university here in the province and started working for a Bible college, and we worked together there. And then within weeks, he had been invited to come preach somewhere, and he's never looked back.
Right.
And something I've really loved about walking with Mike is that I've seen him in many places sit in very pressured situations and represent what he was going to do. And the conversation sometimes got messy. Yeah. Then he walked out doing the thing he said he was going to do. And here he's sitting here with a great reputation. And I know Mike would want to and gives all the glory to Jesus, but I just wanted to say, hey, you're a great example, I think, of what we're talking about.
Yeah. You have to embody this.
Yeah, you have to say, I'm not going to give in to pressure from people, but I'm also not going to walk away.
Right.
Like, I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
As long as I can keep doing it, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but I've seen that in Mike, and I just wanted to call it out for a second.
Hey,
so.
thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we should start a ministry together.
I'm sure you loved every minute of that.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Well, guys, this has been it's been a ton of fun. I'm sure we could keep going around and
Yeah,
around
it's been
on
great.
it.
Thank
Like
you.
I don't know if there's an end in sight. I
Yeah.
think I think the big takeaway is let's just try to follow Jesus.
Yeah. And I think that the just sort of wrapping it up, I think the idea of praying and voting, like I just want to land, I just want to sort of come around to
That's
that.
good, yeah.
That it is that is the element. Like if you wanted to say on earth as it is in heaven, pray, engage heaven, vote, engage earth. I don't think that I think that very much is like vote what you feel like the Lord is leading you
Yes.
to, and actually just keep an open mind and be listening. I very much reject. Anyway, I'm going to go off but just say pray and vote. I think that's super.
That's
important.
a great word.
Yeah. And honestly, like do some work of research.
Yeah.
Like not just listening to us, but like you need to know, what you believe and why, and it has to be more than your feelings.
It has to be more
Like
than
your
the
feelings
and the
are
news
liars,
But I love them.
And the news, but the news placates to your feelings
For sure
and
they
that's
do.
all it's doing.
Yeah, it
and
does.
like just because something feels right doesn't mean that's Jesus.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of the time, Jesus really does my feelings wrong.
Yes. Oh, he sure does.
It's such a good thing the kingdom is in a democracy, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
no kidding. Exactly right. So do some study, do some research, and like ask the big questions and dive in, and do not just get caught up with if you find yourself in the mob, you're probably not with Jesus. He just never seemed to be part of the mob ever. So
Agreed.
Could we end by holding hands?
let's just thank you guys. On that note, thanks everybody. Hey, thanks for tuning in today, everybody. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with my friends about such a complicated and nuanced subject. I hope it helped you ground yourself a little bit more in the great grand scheme of following Jesus and how to reconcile that in the world we live in today. Hey, if you haven't already, would you subscribe to this podcast? Would you leave a positive review? Would you share it for somebody and get this word out to as many people as possible? I'd sure appreciate it. If not, we'll see you next time.